If you're in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, and you have spent your entire life paying payroll tax, chances that you will be receiving Social Security benefits is close to zero. Forget about the AI bubble or the housing crash. This one is far bigger. It's not about the Fed or Wall Street. This is about you. The promise that you will have security in an old age just went down the drain. Social Security Trust Fund is raising the alarm. It is running out of money. Birth rates are collapsing, retirees are living far longer, and the trust fund that's supposed to hold America's future is draining faster than anybody has expected. Almost 78 million Americans are at risk of not receiving Social Security benefits in the foreseeable future. And if you're in your 20s and 30s, then you literally can forget about it. This crisis is so big and so massive that the government does not even want to talk about it. Because if we start talking about it, then serious action must be taken. And that is politically unpopular. The entire Social Security system is based upon the fact that there are far more working people on one side than the number of people who are retiring. If you're living past 65, chances that you will live to 100 or 120 is very low. While everyone else between the ages of 18 to 65 has to work and you must pay payroll taxes. There is literally no other option around it. If you don't do that, you're going to go to jail. But the system was created with the intention that whenever you pay Social Security taxes, that money will partially be invested in assets. Those assets will be accumulating over time and growing, making you more money. And then the Social Security Trust Fund at some point will be so wealthy that it will be able to pay for the retirement of everybody else, no matter how long they live and how many people on the other side are working. However, over time we realized that there is only one way for this system to work, to always have the equation where you have far more working people than the number of people who are retiring. If this equation suddenly flips, then the entire system collapses because it is unsustainable. There should be enough money coming in so that the system or the trust fund can pay to the retirees. When the system was created back in 1930s during the Great Depression, it worked because life expectancy was very low and the number of Americans who were working was far higher than the number of people could possibly even retire. So they have introduced this system. In fact, the ratio was between 42 to 1. For every retired person, 42 people would be in the workforce. And that's because life expectancy back in the days was 62 and the retirement age was 65. So it was literally a scam since day one because most people logically would not even live up to the point where they will be receiving Social Security benefits. Imagine you spending your entire life from the age that you are 18 up to 62, which was the normal life expectancy back in the days, but then you had to wait another 3 years to finally start receiving Social Security benefits. So the point of the system was initially that those people who will make it past the age of 65, they will be receiving those Social Security benefits. And even then, it's not going to be for long, because if you're going to live up to 70 or 73, you would be exceptional. That is not something that usually is going to happen. That's why if you look at the demographic pyramid of the United States back in 1940, suddenly you see that there were a lot of young people, there were a lot of people who were in the workforce, but there were very few people past the age of 65. So the idea behind it was that we had far more people working in the workforce than the number of people who are retired. And in this system, it worked. And that's why the initial tax rate or the payroll tax was simply 1%. You would pay 1% and your employer would pay 1%. And in total, that would make it 2%. And that should be enough to pay for everybody. In fact, the maximum amount of taxable income on payroll tax was just $3,000. However, over time, there was a problem. As the US economy began to grow and people's life expectancy began to grow as well, people start to live far longer. And if you're living longer, then you will be receiving Social Security benefits for far longer. If the life expectancy was 65 on average and now it's 75, Most people would not receive the social security benefits, but now they have to receive them for the next 10 years. That forced the government to take action. The only reason that the system did not collapse is because there were baby boomers. Between 1950s and 60s, a lot of people were born, so the ratio was still sustainable to a certain extent. However, they have increased the payroll tax from 1% to 6.2%. But in total, if you also take the employer's cut, that would be 12.4%. They've also increased the taxable income from $3,000 to $51,000, and they've also increased the retirement age from 65 to 67. Remember, the system only works when the math works out. You can't be paying social security benefits if there isn't enough money that is coming into the trust fund from the working people, from the workforce. However, by 2020s, the entire situation got out of control. It no longer looks like a demographic pyramid. The number of people who are living past the age of 65 has increased dramatically, since life expectancy has increased to 80 years per person. When the system was created, it was 62. Now it's 80. So an extra 18 years. If back in 1930s and 40s, the average person wouldn't actually live to receive their social security benefits, now on average, the person will be receiving 18 years of social security benefits, which means that you need far more money getting into the system to make sure that the system is sustainable. And that's why they have increased the taxable income to $174,000 recently. 76 million baby boomers are retiring. Baby boomers began to retire from 2010 and they will continue up until like 2032. And that's when the entire system is about to collapse because birth rates are collapsing at the same time. So the number of people who are getting in the workforce is shrinking while the number of people who are receiving social security benefits is rising. You don't have to be a genius to understand the problem with the system. And this problem has been in the background for the last 20 to 30 years. In 2024, about $1.4 trillion of payroll tax was paid into the Social Security. At the same time, the total amount of payments amounted to about $1.5 trillion. So basically, the trust is spending far more than it's actually earning, which is why the Social Security Trust Fund began to sell its assets to ensure that everybody can receive his Social Security benefits. But this is unsustainable, and this has been happening since 2010. And according to experts and analysts, Social Security Trust Fund is going to run out of these assets by 2032 or 2033. And at that time, the trust fund will only be able to make as many payments as much money is coming in. And from that moment onwards, if we don't fix the birth rates with each consecutive year, the total amount of social security benefits will continue shrinking. The only solution is migration. You let people to get into the country because when they get in, they start working and they immediately start paying payroll tax. And that's what the United States was very open with its migration policies, at least for the last 50 years. And the data on that is very clear. Since 1970s, when this problem was arising, politicians made it easier to migrate to the United States. And that's why since then, the number of migrations have exploded, and now they represent a huge percentage of American population and American society. Because the type of people who migrate are usually people above 18 years old, and these are not the people who are coming to retire in the United States. These are the people whose have already went to schools, they went to kindergartens, so other nations have invested in these people, but instead of working in those nations and paying payroll taxes in those countries, they're migrating to the United States and paying taxes in the United States, which are maintaining the social security system in the US. So if you think the fact that these so many Western nations allowed so many people to migrate to the United States, to the UK, to other European nations was by accident, then you don't know what is happening. One of the real reasons was this, that the social security trust funds in all of these nations, because every single country has a pretty much similar system to the United States, they also had a problem with these trust funds. They couldn't actually pay their retirees, so had to bring so many people into their nations because everybody will have to pay payroll tax anyways. However, we're living in an age when anti-immigration trends are taking place, where so many countries, including the United States, is like, We don't want more immigrants. We don't want more people coming into our country. They're destroying our culture. They're destroying our society. While immigrants can help with the payroll tax and ensure that the Social Security trust funds does not collapse, it comes at a huge cost. And some people are simply not ready to pay that cost. Social Security benefits are not even so huge to cover all of your expenses. For a lot of retirees, the Social Security benefits that they receive is simply a portion of their expenses. They still have to work, they still have to rely on other sources of income, and those of them who actually invested somewhere and created alternative sources of income are actually retiring comfortably. As the Social Security Trust Fund is running out of money, Congress will have to intervene and they will have to do something. Most likely, the government is not going to borrow more money to ensure that the system does not collapse. They will take some kind of more sustainable measures, like they will stop adjusting Social Security benefits as the inflation is rising. Currently, every single year, they're raising the cost of Social Security benefits and adjusting them to the cost of living. Most likely, that could actually change in the foreseeable future. Or maybe they will simply raise much higher the taxable income, the payroll taxable income. Or maybe simply they will get it from 12.4% to 14% or 15%. Or maybe they will make an argument that people today are living far above 65 years old or 67, and they will increase their retirement age to 70, 72, or 73. All of these are possibilities, which is why, as a rational person, you should never rely on the government for your retirement. They've created this system back in 1930s and forced everybody to pay taxes so that the government will take care of you when you are going to retire. Here we are, almost 100 years after the creation of the Social Security Fund. What did we get at the end of the day? Millions of Americans, or maybe hundreds of millions of Americans, over the course of this period have paid Social Security taxes, but on the other side, they haven't actually received their benefits, maybe because they simply didn't live past the age of retirement, or maybe by the time they retire, the system simply collapsed. And that's why it's extremely important for every single person to think about his own retirement. If you instead take literally as much money as you're paying in payroll tax and invest it wisely on your own, you will be retiring with millions of dollars with a few good investments. So if you want to know what are the top 5 stocks that you should be buying to ensure your retirement, then check out the first link in the description of this video. Thanks guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.